Welcome back to the potting shed. Today I want to talk to you about some of the tools that I use on a regular basis to look after my houseplant. Now this is a toolkit of hardware that I built up over many years, I guess, of looking after my plants, and some of them are what I would call essential and I couldn't live without them, and other things are just nice to have. Some of them are expensive and some of them cost me basically nothing. So hang around and I'll show you the sorts of things that I use and the sorts of things that I think you should absolutely have in your houseplant toolkit. Alrighty, so as you can see at the back there, we have a little watering can. Now this is something that I've had for years. This is a relatively new one. I've got an identical one that I keep inside, and this one stays in the potting shed. They just work. They come with, I don't have it here at the moment, it comes with a tiny little rose on the top to make a really fine spray. And so if you've got some tiny little plant seeds that you've planted, or some really delicate cuttings that you've just planted up, the little fine rose is fantastic for being able to water it without sort of flooding the plant and damaging it. These are great little cans. I'll link them down in the description below. Of course, there are all sorts of different makes of watering can, and I guess the main thing is whether you like to use it and you like the look of it. So I guess it doesn't really matter. These ones are good because they're small enough to be precise when you're trying to get in the amongst the leaves, but big enough to be able to water several plants without having to reload. So what else have we got? This is an interesting tool, and it's actually an aquascaping tool. I don't know if you can see that on the camera. It's a pair of stainless steel scissors, and they're long-handed. And yeah, I do have a aquascape fish tank in my office that I have some live plants growing in there, and I bought these a few years ago to look after them, because you can get down into the water and trim them more easily. But they also work really well for my houseplants. They're really good quality, and if you've got a leaf that is starting to die back at the bottom, at the back, and it's a big plant with big leaves, sometimes it's easier to be able to get in there and cut it right at the base without having to get your arms in and disturb the plant. So a nice to have, I would say, but very handy, and they stay really sharp, and being stainless steel, they won't rust either. Just a nice thing to use, a nice tactile thing, and it's nice to use good quality tools. So that's a nice to have. This, I guess, is an essential on the lower end of the scale, complete with dirt. This is a common garden fork. It's got particularly wide tines, I guess you could call them, but the actual forked bits are reasonably spaced out. I don't even know where this came from. I've had it as far back as I can remember, and yeah, it's great. The reason I have this is when I'm repotting and I'm cleaning the roots of a bonsai or a houseplant, when you take the pot off, I always like to get the soil away from the roots to really refresh the soil and maybe have a look at the roots. It enables you to properly see the roots without the soil on it. Then maybe you want to trim the roots or something like that. And so a fork like this is excellent to use as like a rake to carefully go over and remove the soil from the roots without damaging the roots. That's the key. You can do it with other things, but I've just found a fork like this to be the perfect size as like a mini rake, and you can rake across the top of the surface as well, and it works really well. So this is your virtually free, or free if you can liberate it from the kitchen drawer, an old one that you don't use anymore. But yeah, indispensable. I've literally had it as long as I can remember, and I've probably used it the most out of all the tools. Okay, let's go to a nice to have. I guess this isn't really specifically or specially a houseplant tool. I use this in the garden as well, but it's a pair of secateurs, and these are made by Felco, a very good quality brand, and these are not cheap, to be fair. This is a Felco 2. They're Swiss made, very good quality, the sorts of things that you buy once and will last you a lifetime, and they're the sorts of tools that I like. I just like buying something that you buy once, and if you look after it, the tool will look after you. It's that sort of thing, and that's definitely the case with these Felco secateurs. They're great for pruning in the garden and great for chopping down thicker stems of your houseplant and cutting leaves off and things like that. They're not going to be as precise as something like these scissors. This, you'll get a much finer and more precise cut from this, which is why generally I use this in the garden, but I still use this in the house as well. If I happen to have them on me and I'm just cutting some stems back, they work really well. Now, I must admit, I usually do this over winter, and I haven't done that yet this year, so I need to get on with it. And that is, each year I just clean the blade and both sides. It comes apart, and you can take this blade out and just rub them down with some wire wool. I've got some oil in here. I don't know if anyone's seen what looks like a ketchup or tomato sauce bottle in the background. This has some machine oil in it, and I keep that on the shelf here, and I use that to lubricate the tools that I have, because it's important, if you have tools like this, just to give it a spot of oil from time to time, because it's a bare metal surface that's cutting. It's constantly sort of exposing fresh metal, so kept in an environment like a potting shed here over the winter, it's going to start to rust. So keeping a little bit of oil on it is always good. And what I do to service it, if you like, you'll always pick up a little bit of dirt from the plants that you're cutting, and then a mixture of dirt and surface rust will sort of add up, and that's when you get the sort of the metal breaking down. So once a year, I just like to get out some wire wool, which will just clean the surface and bring it all the contaminants off, using a bit of oil and some wire wool. And then you can sharpen the blade again while you're at it and just renovate the tool. So if you look after your tools, then this will be just as good in another 20 years as it has been in the previous, I don't know how long I've had these, 10, 11 years, something like that. So Felco secateurs, I'll link them up. Very good quality, not the cheapest you can get. Now, what's next? This is a bit of an oddity, and as far as I'm concerned, this is a necessity, but you don't really need it. I just love it. This is a harvest knife, or that's technically the name of it. So you can see it's just a serrated knife with a bit of a bend in it. It's actually sold as an asparagus harvest knife. It's stainless steel again, so it won't rust. It's a bit tarnished because I've used it for, again, over 10 years, but it's still just as sharp. I've never sharpened it. It's got this sort of serrated blade, and it's designed for you to get down to the base of asparagus and cut them. But I just use this for everything, and it just stays sharp, and it's great. I use this for opening sacks of potting compost, cutting string to tie things up. What else? If I'm repotting a plant, this just goes down in between the pot and the root ball just to release the pot. It's just always here in the potting shed, and I'm always using it. It has such a multitude of uses because of the shape and the thinness and the pointy bit, and yeah, it's just good. It's got a nice handle. They're really cheap as well. I think they cost about £12, 11 or £12, so maybe $15, something like that. I don't know if you can get them in the US. Maybe you can. The brand is Darlac. I will link them up in the description below. But just a good multi-purpose tool. And yeah, bought this and it's still going strong. And yeah, just a really good tool. So next, this is a pair of Bonsai Shears. Again, not specific to houseplants, I suppose, but I do use them on my houseplant as well. Somewhere in the middle between the secateurs and the long, oh, don't do that, and the long handle scissors. These have a bit of sort of long handle on them, and they're very precise for cutting. You can get really nice, neat cuts with it, and they just feel nice. Obviously, I keep bonsai, so I have some bonsai shears for cutting smaller branches and slightly thicker branches, but once they get past, I don't know, about 3mm, you don't really want to damage the surface of these with too thicker hardwood branches. You then use something else, maybe like the secateurs, or you actually have branch cutters in bonsai tools. But I also have different things I would use. But again, just a nice thing. They're not massively expensive, but Japanese steel works well. If you look after it, they'll last forever. Again, just a little bit of oil. There's always a very slight sheen of oil on these, because if you keep them that way, they won't rust, and they'll stay useful and sharp much longer. So always worth looking after your tools. What else we got? A pair of wire cutters. Stands to reason. If you're wiring something up, if you are training a monstera around a moss pole or something and you want to wire it, then you're going to need a pair of wire cutters. Just basic. I've had these for donkey's years. Again, there is a slight sheen of oil on them because I like to try and keep them, you know, they work nice and smoothly. They look a bit doggy because I don't worry about cleaning these too much, but they work perfectly well. And I've had these probably for over 10 years as well. So cutting wire, even electrical wire. I've got some lights up in here to light the potting shed when I'm making videos. So I put some extra lights up. And I think a mouse got in and chewed the light cable, which was not the best thing, because I went to turn the lights on and half of my lights didn't work because a mouse who will remain nameless chewed through the wire. So I had to use these to cut them back and reconnect the wire before we could have some lights back. So these things happen. That's pretty much it. Last thing, I've got a little pen knife here. I don't even know where this came from. Someone gave it to me, I think. Again, just handy. Not a particularly expensive one, but just handy. If you've got it on you, you can keep it in your pocket for cutting things back. If I'm making cuttings, just slicing cuttings down to size. If I'm on the workbench and I'm just cutting out some cuttings and things like that, it's got a corkscrew in here and various different other multi-tools. Always handy to have. Just the sort of thing that you accumulate over time, and the more things you have like this, the more likely you are to have something to lay your hand on if you're doing something. So yeah, that's my hardware collection, if you like, that I use on a regular basis. I'll go through some of the other things, like what pest control I use and other things like that on another video, but I just thought I would keep this video for the tools that I use, and yeah, we'll do another video about some of the other kit that I have for my houseplant hobby. I hope this has been interesting or useful to you. Please give it a thumbs up if it has been, and subscribe if you're new around here, because we have more houseplant related videos coming along very soon. Thanks for watching.